In the most elite corners of racing, a 2% speed boost is enough to spark international scandal and get a breakthrough instantly banned. But here is the secret. The hacks that terrify rule makers are hiding in plain sight, sitting on ordinary cruising boats today. If you have ever wondered how some slow cruisers quietly outrun the local fleet, you are about to see banned America's Cup technology, outlawed rig tricks, and forbidden electronics repurposed for everyday sailors. What do the racing secretly know that they do not want you to find out? In 1987, the America's Cup in Fremantle turned into a laboratory for banned technology. Dennis Connor's Stars and Stripes rolled out a hull covered in 3M Riblet film, microscopic grooves straight from NASA wind tunnel tests, designed to mimic shark skin and cut drag. Lab trials showed up to 8% less friction on flat plates, and in the messy world of real racing, that translated to a 2 to 3% net speed boost. In the Cup, that is not a rounding error, it is a ticket to the protest room. The New Zealand syndicate protested furiously, waving the rulebook and demanding the jury ban the Riblets as an illegal surface treatment. The argument was simple: the hull had to be smooth, and Riblets, they claimed, were a step too far, an unfair appendage disguised as a finish. The jury, after days of hearings and technical testimony, sided with Connor. For that regatta, the micro grooves were legal. The protest flag came down, but the damage was done. Riblet films were quickly blacklisted in one design and class rules around the world. The fear was not just speed, it was an arms race in expensive, hard-to-police coatings. Now, here is the twist. What was once a scandal is just a line item at the chandlery. Silicone foul release paints and super slick hull wraps use the same physics, shedding slime and keeping the flow clean. Prop Speed, for example, claims up to 5% efficiency gains on powerboats, and hull coatings regularly post 2 to 3% speed or fuel savings, no protest required. The difference? Racers fought over decimal points in the jury room. The smart cruiser just gets a smoother ride and a smaller fuel bill. They cried foul. We call it homework. In 1983, the docks in Newport buzzed with rumors, but the real drama sat hidden under a canvas skirt. Australia 2's winged keel never saw daylight unless the measurement committee was present, and even then, only after the last camera was turned away. Ben Lexon, the designer, had spent months running secret tank tests in the Netherlands, working out how upturned wings at the keel tip could generate lift like a hydrofoil while dropping the center of gravity. The result was a shorter keel with a heavy bulb, letting Australia 2 tack sharper and point higher, all while keeping the draft shallow enough for the 12-meter rule. Security was tight. Every haul-out meant tarps, guarded access, and divers in the water to block underwater photos. As one racing historian put it, you didn't just hide the keel, you hid the future. The New York Yacht Club, desperate to defend its 132-year streak, filed formal protests. They claimed the keel broke nationality rules, that it was designed outside Australia, that the wings dipped too deep when the boat heeled. The jury, after weeks of hearings and technical testimony, cleared the design. No measurement rule was broken. Australia 2 went on to win the Cup 4-3, ending the New York Yacht Club's century-long grip. Today, the same principle lives on under thousands of cruising boats. Shoal draft cruisers use bulb keels and winglets to get into skinny Bahamian anchorages while keeping the stability of a deep racer. What was once a guarded secret, shrouded in tarps and legal threats, is now standard hardware, ordered from a catalog, bolted on by the yard, and never once protested. The racing committee's worst nightmare has become every cruiser's favorite hack. On the sail loft floor, a tape measure snaps across the head of a square-top mainsail. The numbers do not lie. The top girth, marked as MHB and MGT on the rating form, balloons out compared to the old-school triangle. That extra cloth up high is where the cleanest wind lives, above the mast turbulence and away from the messy deck-level air. Sailmakers have run the numbers for decades. Move from a pinched triangular main to a full square top, and you are looking at a real-world gain of 5 to 15% in effective drive for the same mast height. That is horsepower where it counts, and it is why every Grand Prix designer wants a big roach and a fat headboard. But the rating office has its own tape. Under IRC and ORC, every inch of extra girth in the head gets measured, logged, and penalized. The calculation is brutal. More area up top means a spike in your time correction coefficient. On a 35-footer, a square top main can hit you for several points on your rating, enough to put you minutes behind on corrected time, even if you are first across the line. It is a tax on ambition, designed to keep the fleet close and the top end in check. For the cruiser, that penalty does not exist. You get all the power of a square top, more drive in light air, easier depowering in gusts, and the option to shorten the mast for bridge clearance without paying a single point. The hardware checklist is short: full-length battens, upgraded track cars, a beefier headboard, and batten receptacles that will not jam when you reef. Install it once, and you are sailing with the kind of aerodynamic edge that would make a rating committee sweat. The only protest flag is the one you hang as a sunshade in the cockpit. On the foredeck, a sailmaker unrolls a bolt of fabric and checks the tape at mid-girth. This is the birthplace of the Code Zero, a sail that exists because designers found a loophole in the rulebook. In the late IMS and early IRC era, spinnakers were defined by a mid-girth at least 75% of the foot length. If you built a head sail that just barely hit that number, it counted as a spinnaker on paper even if it looked and flew like a Genoa. The result was the Code Zero, flat, high aspect, and deadly in light air, sitting right in the gap between a drifter and a true kite. For racers, the Code Zero was a way to sneak an extra gear into the sail inventory. Rule writers caught on and started policing mid-girth with calipers and calculators, slapping rating penalties or limiting their use. But for cruisers, there is no inventory limit and no penalty calculation. The Code Zero is the engine off canvas. In 6 to 12 knots apparent, it turns a glassy morning into a silent reach at 5 or 6 knots. On a modern cruiser, it is usually set from a bowsprit or anchor roller, flying from a top-down furler. Hoist it, unfurl, and the boat glides forward while the diesel stays cold. The gear list is straightforward: a reinforced tack point, a halyard that will not stretch, and a furler built for the torque of rolling up a big, flat sail when the breeze picks up. No need for a racing crew or a protest committee, just a couple of buttons and a single line to trim. Ask any sailmaker or rigger and they will tell you the Code Zero is the best way to cheat the doldrums. On a racer, it is a loophole. On a cruiser, it is just common sense. Pressing a button beats busting your back, unless you are racing under Rule 52. The official text is blunt. A boat's standing rigging, running rigging, spars and movable hull appendages shall be adjusted and operated only by the power provided by the crew. That means no electric winches, no hydraulic rams, no stored power. But for the cruiser, especially anyone over 60, that is not a restriction, it is an invitation. Electric winches have turned sail handling from a full-body workout into a one-finger job. On a 40 to 50-foot cruiser, a typical electric winch pulls 130 to 150 amps at peak load, about the same as a big starter motor, but for longer. Most manufacturers recommend sizing your house battery bank at 3 times your daily draw, which for a pair of powered primaries and a halyard winch puts you in the 400 to 800 amp-hour range. AGM or lithium, the math is the same. A big bank, a high-output alternator, and a dedicated breaker, usually 150 amps, right at the battery. If you are running a 12-volt system, heavy gauge cable is mandatory. A BYC standards call for 10 AWG or bigger to keep voltage drop under control. But the real secret is not the wire, it is what is under the winch. The deck pad needs a solid aluminum or stainless backing plate through bolted and bedded to spread the load. No one wants to see a winch RIP out in a blow. Surveyors and insurers will check for this, and a shoddy install can void your coverage. Every electric winch still takes a manual handle, so if the power goes out, you can crank by hand. That is your backup. With the right setup, an older couple can reef, hoist, and trim in a squall without breaking a sweat. The racing committee might call it cheating, but your rotator cuff calls it survival. Rule 52 was written for young backs and big crews. For the cruiser, stored power is not just a hack, it is the difference between sailing and staying home. A silent helmsman never gets tired, never loses focus, and does not argue about whose turn it is. Modern autopilot systems, especially the gyro-stabilized kind, have quietly replaced the best human drivers on offshore cruisers. These systems read a solid-state compass, a rate gyro, and sometimes even wind angle, making course corrections faster than any hand on the wheel. Vendée Globe skippers will tell you the truth. The pilot steers straighter, holds a better average, and never blinks when a squall comes through at 3 in the morning. For a 40 to 50-foot cruiser, the common below-deck linear drive is the workhorse. A Raymarine Type 2 or B and G HLD 2000 will sip about 4 to 8 amps in normal conditions and up to 15 amps in heavy weather. Offshore, that adds up. Expect 40 to 80 amp hours a day just for the pilot. The battery bank needs to be sized for real-world use. A 400 to 800 amp hour house bank, AGM or lithium, is the standard range with dedicated circuit protection and a breaker close to the battery. Charging comes from a high-output alternator, solar, or wind, just as you would plan for your fridge and instruments. Redundancy is not optional. Every serious cruising setup keeps the original mechanical linkage, an emergency tiller or wheel lockout, ready to go if the drive fails. Some owners carry a spare pilot or a wind vane backup, especially for ocean passages. The checklist is simple. Test the pilot before every trip, know where the breaker is, and keep the emergency gear accessible. When the pilot is running, you are free to trim sails, make coffee, or plot the next course. The racing committee might call it cheating, but for the cruiser, a good autopilot is the difference between exhaustion and arriving with a smile. Water ballast is the invisible crew nobody argues with. On a performance cruiser, the trick is simple. Pump seawater into windward tanks when you are heeled over, and suddenly you have the righting force of 10 big guys on the rail without the sandwich bill or the complaints. The numbers are practical. A typical tank system for a 40-foot boat holds 300 to 400 liters per side, and the pump that does the heavy lifting is usually rated 750 gallons per hour, about 45 liters a minute. That is enough to shift a full tank in under 10 minutes, tack to tack. Diaphragm or impeller pumps are common, but the real key is baffling, because without baffles, water sloshes side to side, turning your ballast into a free surface hazard. That is a stability nightmare in a knockdown. Every surveyor has a story about a do-it-yourself tank with no vent or overflow, so vent lines and properly sized overflows are not optional. The best systems use transfer manifolds and positive shutoffs, so you can isolate tanks in a blow. For a cruising couple, water ballast is the football team you do not have to feed, but it only works if you install it with the same paranoia as a race boat. Pump, baffle, vent. Then relax while your boat stays flat and fast. Canting keels are the nuclear option in the world of stability hacks. They swing thousands of pounds of lead to windward at the push of a button, instantly doubling righting moment and letting a lightweight hull carry a sail plan that would capsize a traditional cruiser. But every shortcut comes with a bill. In 2008, during the Vendée Globe, Vincent Rieu's PRB collided with a floating buoy. The hull took the first hit, but the real trouble started days later. Cracks and deformation crept into the structure around the Canting keel box. The keel itself stayed attached, but the support zone was compromised. Rieu had to abandon the race before the Southern Ocean could finish the job. That incident, and a string of similar failures, forced the offshore world to treat canting keels like aircraft wings. Today, any serious canting keel yacht faces a regime of non-destructive testing, ultrasound scans, and specialist surveys. Insurers demand documentation on every weld, bearing, and ram. Miss a survey or hide a grounding and your coverage can vanish overnight. For a cruiser, the decision tree is stark. If you want CUP level power, be ready for airline level inspections and costs. Otherwise, keep your ballast fixed and your surveyor smiling. Racing rules love to draw lines, literally. Rule 50.3, the famous outrigger clause, says you cannot sheet a sail to any point outside the hull unless you are using a spinnaker or a whisker pole. And even then, most rating rules cap your pole at the J measurement. For the racer, that means a tape measure at the dock and a protest flag ready if your pole sneaks an inch too far. The logic is simple. If you let the clue swing outboard, you get a bigger projected sail area, more stable downwind flow, and most importantly, a boat that stops rolling long enough to keep your coffee in the mug. But if you are not chasing a corrected time trophy, the rulebook is just a suggestion. Cruisers fit oversized whisker poles, pin them to the mast, and pole out a Genoa wing and wing for miles. The death roll disappears, the autopilot relaxes, and the cockpit stays dry. Then there is the forbidden fruit, the multi-hull. For decades, yacht clubs and blue water races wrote their notices of race so only monohulls need apply. Catamarans and trimarans were dismissed as rafts, too fast, too wide, too undignified for the Commodore's taste. The official reasons were safety and rating fairness. The unofficial reason? Nobody likes being passed by a plastic picnic table doing twice the speed while your gin slides off the saloon table. Today, those same multi-hulls are the darlings of the charter fleet and the marina, offering flat sailing, huge decks, and a living room that does not heel. The only real penalty left is finding a slip wide enough and paying for 2 hulls worth of bottom paint. For the cruiser, it is the ultimate loophole, banned from the race but unbeatable for the cruise. Today, cruising sailors are free from the rating penalties and protest flags that define elite racing. As technology once banned from the podium becomes standard at the dock, the real contest shifts from rule compliance to practical ingenuity. Comfort and speed now go hand in hand, no committee required. The only limit left is your imagination and how far you're willing to bend the wind. Share your favorite outlaw upgrade below.